name.
The American tourist who's escaped charges in the South Island. This is a curious little story out of the Otago Daily Times. He had already apparently been barred from backpackers' accommodation in a couple of places, Christchurch and Queenstown, and he seems to have noticed a woman win some cash at the casino in Dunedin and followed her and a friend to their hotel, and she came out of the bathroom and found him rummaging through her handbag, and he scarpered with $420, although she gave chase. And he handed himself in after his photo appeared on social media and the Otago Daily Times, and denied the charges, I think, but the police gave him the option of a pre-charge warning or of going to court, and he chose the pre-charge warning.
Well, you would, wouldn't you?
As you would. And he paid back the money, which means admitting the crime, and he paid back the money which he happened to have in his wallet. What would you do with him?
Send him to court.
It's interesting because Immigration New Zealand is assessing whether the man can remain in New Zealand, and the public is advised to remain vigilant and be cautious of the American.
It depends to some degree on his circumstances as well. I mean, was he just a thief, a guy who's waiting for a chance, or did he really badly need money? Was he in trouble? All those things matter.
I know, we do not know those things, do we?
I thought from the story that he was he was also a tourist.
Yes, or a visitor.
Yeah,
I suppose you call him a tourist.
I mean, I don't know why. I don't think we want tourists ripping off other tourists, do we? So I think he should just probably be sent home.
Do you wonder why he wasn't fully charged? Isn't that what courts are for, though?
Yes, it is. I mean, it's a clear case of theft, and I hope she put her gown on before she left the bathroom in pursuit.
Imagine the fright.
I wonder how I kind of did think there was a few holes in the story. I wonder how he had got into her room in the start, in a hotel.
A double Olympic champion is someone who wins gold in 2 disciplines at one Olympics. For example, the 800 and 1500, which Peter Snell did. Twice Olympic champion means you win an event and win the same event 4 years later. That's an interesting, it's probably a correct distinction, but we all get it muddled up, I think, don't we?
We do, yeah. Yes.
That makes sense.
David Cameron Savage's, I wanted to ask you about this in particular, Gordon, because not that I'm saying you wouldn't be interested, Nikki, but I'm dying to hear what you think about it. David Cameron Savage's Boris Johnson, as we know, in what's called an astonishing House of Commons speech, accusing him of backing the Leave the EU campaign in a bid for the Tory leadership, which we wondered a couple of days ago. And he's come back to Britain with this agreement on continued British membership that, I suppose if you generalise, the left thinks has substance and the right does not, and the polls are neck and neck. Slightly more people are saying leave. Does it remind you a wee bit, because Boris has been compared to Winston, of Neville Chamberlain coming back with the white paper and, Winston Churchill?
Why am I smiling? I'll tell you
know.
why I'm smiling, because I can remember when we used to get English. I'm amazed at the number of world leaders who are true to type. Putin, to me, looks like a really bad... He can't be as bad as he looks. He sort of walks along in a kind of long-armed, down the red carpet, this long walk, looking at people. I mean, he looks so bad, he couldn't be that bad. Boris Johnson looks to me like the character out of an old comic I used to have. He's a sort of fat boy that was pretty... a posh boy. In fact, Cameron and Boris Johnson, all those people were called posh boys by a highly respected member of the Tory party a few years ago. I couldn't take Boris Johnson seriously. Have you ever seen him? Have you ever seen him talk? He talks with a lisp, like an upper class Englishman, and he's round-faced and he's grinning all the time. He's a strange...
He's got an X factor, though, obviously, hasn't he? He's charismatic.
Well, I don't know. It doesn't reach me. He seems to be a caricature.
What do either of you think of the deal that Cameron got? Or we don't have time to talk about that, but what more, Germani, what will Britain do? Which way will the Brits vote? You got an idea?
You said it's neck and neck, right? 50-50.
Yeah.
I saw a speech to the European Parliament by the leader of the UKIP, which is the United Kingdom Independent Party, and it was a brilliant speech. Have you ever seen him speak?
Which one?
The leader of what's his name?
Farage.
Yeah. It was a brilliant speech he made to the European Parliament.
I've never actually seen one of his speeches.
Well, it was amazing. He spoke without any notes or anything, and he attacked France and Germany. And they were sitting there, frozen
Gordon
face.
McLaughlin, Nikki Bazant, thank you very much, both of you. John Campbell's Checkpoint follows.
Kia ora everyone, welcome to Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm John Campbell on behalf of the Checkpoint team. Thank you for joining us. Tonight, an extraordinary account of what Cyclone Winston was like when it hit. We're in a community shelter and we learn how much has been lost from a woman who's lost everything. Also tonight, is Auckland's future taking shape as we speak with the unitary plan before council? We are there, live. The trial begins with the man charged with killing 2 wind staff in Ashburton, but the accused himself isn't in court. And Awaroa Beach, Brendan McCullum, and one man's war on flies. But we begin with RNZ News. Here's Leilani Mamoisia.
Kia ora, good evening. The trial of double murder accused Russell Tully has heard the 49-year-old intended to kill everyone working at the Ashburton Work and Income Office during a shooting spree in 2014. He's charged with shooting dead 2 employees, the attempted murder of 2 of their colleagues, firearms charges and setting a man trap. During his opening address, the Crown lawyer Andrew McRae said the receptionist Peggy Noble was his first victim.
Now, Mr. Tully came up beside Mrs. Noble. He stood there and he lifted the pump-action sawn-off shotgun and fired a shotgun shell and all of its pellets into her chest, killing her almost instantaneously.
Andrew McRae said Mr. Tully then went on to kill Lee Cleveland and attempted to shoot dead Lindy Curtis and Kim Adams. In Fiji, thousands of cyclone victims are starting to rebuild their devastated homes themselves because no help has yet come. The death toll from Cyclone Winston has risen to 42. Our reporter Alex Perrottet is in the north of the country's main island, Viti Levu, which has borne the brunt of the massive storm.
In Raki and the surrounding suburbs in this northern part of Viti Levu, there is carnage. Around every corner, hundreds and hundreds of houses with roofs detached, walls flattened. In Raki town, a lady goes to the Raki Town Provincial Council to ask for shelter for herself and her grandchildren. The Turanga Nikoro, or chief of Namuai Munda village, is upset. He's asking for more housing and more tarpaulins for his village. He says 90% of the houses there were destroyed. He says 500 people are living in 6 houses, all cramped together. In Raki, Alex Perrottet.
Discussions are heated in the opening hours of what will be a lengthy Auckland Council meeting over housing density. A group of councillors want the council to withdraw its latest stance to be put to an independent panel considering the city's unitary plan. Several members of the public have said the proposed higher densities should be put to property owners first. The youth group Generation Zero, though, argues higher densities are needed to provide more affordable housing. Its spokesman, Dr. Sudhir Singh, says the debate needs to involve more than property owners with time to attend public meetings.
Unfortunately, the people that are currently struggling to afford to live in Auckland have not been able to attend meetings like this because they're working double jobs just to pay the rent. So I think council needs to take into account their perspectives as well as everyone who's turning up to these meetings in person.
Sudhir Singh. A vote on whether the council will change its evidence to the unitary panel is expected this evening. The organiser of the crowdfunding campaign to buy Awaroa Beach says he hopes all those who pledged money to buy the beach have their money ready so the deal can be finalised. The successful bid was confirmed after 11th hour negotiations late last night. Nearly 40,000 New Zealanders pledged more than $2,278,000 to buy the land in Abel Tasman National Park. The deal was secured after the government and a yet-to-be-named donor put in money. The campaign organiser, Dwayne Major, says all New Zealanders who made pledges, including himself, need to make sure they have their money ready to pay. The government says it pitched in $350,000, which will come from the Nature Heritage Fund. MediaWorks head of news Mark Jennings has resigned. In late 2014, Mr Jennings was appointed to lead the integration of MediaWorks TV, radio and digital news operations into a unified news team, which launched as News Hub earlier this month. Earlier today, it was revealed that 9 MSN editor-in-chief Hal Crawford had resigned to take on the chief news officer role at MediaWorks. The police have given the all clear to 6 schools following hoax threats made early this afternoon. At least 2 schools, Brookfield Primary School in Tauranga and Tamatea High School in Napier, were evacuated and searched. The police also investigated incidents at Logan Park High School in Dunedin, Wellington High School, Burnside High School in Christchurch and Central Normal School in Palmerston North. There will be no ceremonial burning of his kit to mark his retirement from international cricket, but Brendan McCullum does plan on celebrating his 14 years on the international scene with teammates. McCullum's 101 Test career ended with a 7-wicket loss to Australia in Christchurch this afternoon, with Australia winning the series 2-0 and taking over the world #1 ranking. McCullum says he won't be marking his retirement with a symbolic pyre of his gear.
Well, not on purpose anyway, but who knows what will happen tonight. But I'm not a real sentimental sort of bloke, but my black cap will hold pride of place somewhere, and yeah, that'll be probably it.
Brendan McCullum. Meanwhile, in the third and deciding women's one-dayer in Mount Maunganui, Australia were 152 for 3 after 35 overs in reply to New Zealand's total of 243. The Blues coach Tana Umanga has named 2 All Blacks on the bench for Friday night's Super Rugby season opener against the champion Highlanders in Auckland, with Renee Ranger and Charlie Faumuina in the reserves. The Hurricanes' captain, All Black hooker Dane Coles, is in doubt for their opener against the Brumbies on Friday after picking up a calf injury in training. And the New Zealand women's hockey team have drawn 2-2 with hosts Argentina in the first of 6 tests at Mar del Plata. And that's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Michael Hamill-Green and Martin Bush talk about setting up an online living peace museum, because apparently it's got more chance in cyberspace. There's part 1 of our drama Undercover Mumbai, the imagined life of Police Inspector Alia Khan, and Heinrich Greenbaum wonders whether maritime law is ready for robotic ships. Well, you didn't think it was going to stop with driverless cars, did you? Join me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
And Met Service weather to midnight tomorrow. In the west from Waikato to Wellington, including Bay of Plenty and the central high country, cloudy at times, patchy drizzle about Bay of Plenty, Horowhenua and Kapiti tomorrow morning, all clearing by midday. For the remainder of the North Island, fine weather. Nelson, Marlborough and North Canterbury fine with variable high cloud. South Canterbury, Otago and Southland, increasing high cloud, scattered rain developing, but gradually clearing from the north tomorrow afternoon and evening. In Bulla, there's a few showers, mainly about the coast, clearing tomorrow afternoon. Westland and Fiordland rain spreading north with heavy falls south of Harihari, gradually easing tomorrow. And in the Chatham Islands, it's mainly fine. And I'll be back with more news and sports headlines at 5:30. It's now 5:08.
Thank you very much, Leilani. We're going to pick up where Leilani started to. 42 people confirmed dead from Cyclone Winston in Fiji. Remember, this was forecast. People knew it was coming. They took shelter. But for 42 people, there wasn't enough shelter in their villages or on their islands to withstand winds that were that powerful. We begin tonight with what it was like in the storm and what it is like now in the crowded shelters 4 days on. This is Marama Dunn, who lives with her extended family, including elderly parents in Rakiraki, and who was there when the cyclone hit.
It was really terrifying. I mean, nobody would want to live through this event, to go through what we went through. And actually living through it was just an experience of a lifetime. You will never just go away that easily, especially knowing that your children are the ones that are involved in it also.
What happened to your home?
It just all got blown off the rooftop. We had to run underneath the house and stay in the to just go in the wet, in the mud and everything. We had to just crawl underneath the house so that we can just keep the children safe. hearing all the wind just blowing around you. It was really terrifying. We just didn't know. Maybe the whole house could collapse on you again, even if you're underneath the house. But that was the safest place for us to be. And talking about it is, I'm sorry, quite hard to just, to relive the whole event again. Talk about it over the phone.
Yeah, I can understand that entirely. Where are you now, Marama? Where are you talking to
me
me
from? I'm at the evacuation center in Raki. I'm at the evacuation center in Raki. It's Penang High School, the high school in Raki. We were fortunate enough to have been brought by the police and the fire department. They brought us over here to just take shelter here.
And Marama, I understand that the evacuation centres are very, very crowded. Is that what it's like there?
Yes, it is very crowded.
And they are people like you who have lost their homes, who have lost everything and have nowhere else to go.
Everything, and nowhere else to go. Villages, people who live off the land that have just come out from their villages. They even have nowhere, no transport to go home because they were stuck here. And they don't even know if half of their families are alive or not. And because there's no other means of communication, we've tried through cell phones, we've tried everything, even to get some solar energy thing so that we can charge our phones to call, but there's no network.
What is your village like now? Is the entire village destroyed?
There's a village here in Raki. It has only 3 homes standing. Where I live, the area that I live in, all the homes were destroyed. Nothing's left.
Marama, I'm so sorry. What are you going to do now? What will you do now? How can you start again?
We're just trying to hold hands together with everybody that is around here and just help one another rebuild our lives again, because we cannot rely on the government because there's so much damage done. And I know they have, I don't know what their contingency plan or whatever their plans they have, but I told them we just have to hold hands together through all of this to get this, so that we can just help one another out of this situation.
Marama Dunn from the village of Raki. Updating the New Zealand response, we received a statement from the New Zealand Defence Force about half an hour ago. I quote, HMNZS Canterbury and Wellington will be dispatched to support relief efforts in Fiji as it recovers from Tropical Cyclone Winston. Wellington is expected to sail from Devonport tomorrow afternoon, Canterbury on Sunday, the 28th of Feb. Royal New Zealand Air Force aircraft are also in the air today in support of Fiji. That statement from the Defence Force. Checkpoint understands an emergency meeting of NGOs in Fiji is being held about now. We are going to speak to UNICEF's communications specialist for the Pacific, Alice Clements, when she is out of that meeting to update the aid response. 5:13 on Checkpoint. The Auckland Council is at a crossroads tonight, and I guess that means the city is too, as hundreds of people watch an extraordinary meeting on the level of housing density the council wants to see. This will shape the city's future. A group of councillors wants to scrap arguments made in public in December for higher housing density in the city's unitary plan than previously agreed. So the unitary plan was always about density. This was upping the density. Onlookers have spilled out into an overflow room to watch on video what is set to turn into a marathon meeting. Auckland Issues correspondent Todd Niall is at the meeting and joins us now live. Todd, what is the atmosphere like there?
It's calmed down a little bit now because, we're 3 hours in almost to this meeting, and the public submission stage is over, and a lot of supporters left at that point. But there's probably 100 people in the main council chamber at the moment listening to what is still part of the preamble for the meeting, which is the presentation of background material and information from council officers. But, this is a crucial meeting politically for the Auckland Council in this unitary plan process, and there's been some quite heated contributions and heckling from the back of the room.
Todd, can you tell us about the public submissions? Were they evenly divided? Did they strongly favour arguments for or against the unitary plan? What was the gist of them?
There were 8 slots available to groups and public submissions, and they were divided into 4 for and 4 against. And against is whether or not the council should withdraw its submissions to the unitary plan hearings panel. Those opposing the withdrawal submissions and urging the council to stay on track included, for example, Generation Zero, the young people's group, where the spokesman is Sudhir Singh, basically talked about the need for whatever the council does to reflect the needs of all of Auckland and not just the property owners who, he said, risked pulling up the ladder behind them in trying to prevent further intensification of their suburbs. Those urging the council to withdraw the application basically included Richard Burton from the Auckland 2040 campaign, which ran that big public meeting in Koimarama a week or so back, where 700 people turned out. Similarly, Don Stock from that Koimarama Mission Bay residents group also urged the council to stay on track, saying that housing affordability wouldn't be advanced by making higher density housing in an expensive area like Mission Bay. So for and against there, and also submissions from some of the local boards.
Todd, for people outside of Auckland in particular, for whom the term unitary plan may not have terribly much meaning at all, why is this so important?
The plan is important because it basically sets the platform for the development and how Auckland will grow, the shape of Auckland, where the different types of housing will be for the next 30 years. So the plan itself is important. Politically, this process now is important because this whole unitary plan thing was set up by the government. The process, the time frame, the government is adamant that it wants this plan delivered on time by September, and, you know, in brackets, preferably with as much density and growth capacity as possible. If the council today in some way does something complicated that may disrupt the process of the unitary plan hearings panel, it's not clear what the consequences of that are going to be for the panel doing its work on time. The other risk which the council staff have been putting is if they can't play their A game, if you like, before the panel, they can't argue the case as it is now, then others who have views on higher or lower density will perhaps be heard more by the panel.
Todd, I know making predictions is a dangerous business in Auckland local body politics, but what do you suspect the outcome is going to be tonight?
Well, at the start of the day, my feeling was the raw numbers were that a majority did want to overturn the council going in on that position, but these meetings have an unusual way of people start to introduce compromise motions. They may have talked through some of these compromise motions with various councillors during the day. You may only need 2 or 3 nominally to shift from one side of the camp to the other, to change the outcome of the meeting. So, the boring old cliche, it's probably too close to call, but, you would imagine that someone will come up with something that will keep this on track.
Todd Niall, thank you. Todd, we will come back to you if there's any further developments. Todd Niall at this big unitary plan meeting down not far from us here, the Auckland City Council meeting to discuss effectively the density levels of the city's future. How do you get people into housing in the city? Do you go up or do you go out? That's in very simple terms. The unitary plan is available online if you are terribly interested in it. It is 5:19. New Zealand has officially purchased a beach. The government stepped in late last night after 11th hour negotiations with a contribution to get the crowdfunding tender over the line. We're going to talk more about the crowdfunding aspects of it later. Nearly 40,000 New Zealanders pledged more than $2.278 million to buy the land in Abel Tasman National Park. Leading the campaign from its conception over Christmas lunch was Christchurch businessman Dwayne Major. He told me by a Skype video how the deal unfolded last night.
Oh, elated. There's a lot of adrenaline. Adrenaline's been keeping us going for a while. We've had a lot of laughs. That's been keeping us going too. There'll be a lot of sleep required. Last night was absolutely a ridiculous piece of, media. It was a ridiculous piece of just life. It was just unbelievably crazy. So someone will never forget. And then to wake up, we were going to, it came through at 10:57, so we were going to go for it, this evening. I thought, there's no way I can keep a poker face that long. So Then there was a scramble this morning, and we've just shared the good news, and the details are coming to hand, but it's been the same the whole way. You dot the I's later, cross the T's later. We're just getting on with it, and we've been having a great time, and we've just, if people like yourself want to talk, let's talk, because it's about us as New Zealanders, and you guys have played a huge part in this process, so I don't think you guys realise how much you've done for New Zealand, you journos.
Well, yeah, it was your idea. I mean, you've made this happen. Where did you... So can we go through the maths? So you, after the Give a Little account closed, how much money did you have?
It was $278,171.09.
So 2 million and two.
Yeah, 2.278.
Okay, 2.278. And what did you buy it for? What did you pay for Awaroa in the end?
All up, it was 2.85. A lot.
So you were 600 grand shy, right?
Well, we didn't know that at the time.
Yeah.
This is this crazy tender process, right? It's absolutely crazy. And we were told that there was other vendors, other interested parties, and you got to take that on faith. And there was a lot of brinkmanship, and I think that's how the process rolls. So I relied on, Chris Kennedy, CEO of Harcourt's, good man, knows what he's about. And same with Andrew Peterson from Bell Gully and Jeff Harley, barrister, sort of a conservationist background. They knew what they were doing, and me and Adam just sat in the back seat and went for an absolute ride, because to actually determine a price in a tender situation, very difficult. So, we sort of made it up as we went along, and we renegotiated tender bids a numbers of times during that. It was really crazy, and there was many times we thought, oh, it's over. So we actually saw an email, it's over.
In the end, it became a bit like an auction, right? So it started off this kind of tender process, but you were obviously fighting with other bidders to get it. The government stumped up with 350,000, which still left you about $250,000 shy. Where did that come from?
Well, the whole process, the first thing we put in sort of around about the 2 mil, which is what we had, because we had to consider, a credit card default and all these blah, 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 sort of very safe, because we also didn't want to lose our house, as they were really concerned about that. But then after we put that in, then a philanthropic trust came in, saw the philanthropy aspect of this, and they said, we're prepared to underwrite. And then after a short period of time, they realised, actually, no, we're going to donate. And then, okay, so when it came time in the tender bidding, we actually had a little bit more. And there was a whole bunch of jousting. And then, of course, there's the issue of all the conditions that we had as a public campaign. So we worked hard to reduce those numbers of conditions. And then finally, the government said they put in 150. And that's where we were sort of yesterday afternoon. And it just didn't look, they wanted more than that. And we were shy by quite a bit. And then it was on, it was off, and it was on and off. And me and Adam wrote the farewell, this is the end speech. And that was it. And then it just sprung to life again. And then right out of the blue, right at the end, at the very, very end, we were hiding from everyone in the bathroom, me and Adam, trying to have a private conversation on a conference call. And the government came in with an extra 200 just to take it at the very, very last. And so they called what they said is keeping their powder dry. And so we made it. It's 2.85. If you add everything up, I think it's 2.87. There's a couple of 20 grand the lawyer team wanted to make sure, just in case, for any kind of hidden costs and expenses. So it was an absolute stunning affair. It's been a pretty special day, and it does, I hope, create for my kids an experience of telethon. That's exactly what I had, and hopefully you look old enough to remember telethon, and I think it's really cool for the Kiwi spirit of generosity and sort of shared values that are coming through. I think it's an amazing data. And that's why I love talking to you guys, because we as New Zealanders all need to pat ourselves on the back. We've done something very cool.
Christchurch businessman Dwayne Major. We're going to talk more about the Give a Little aspects. How does crowd sourcing work a little bit later in the program, 24 minutes past 5. The trial of double murder accused Russell John Tully has heard a harrowing account of the moment he allegedly went on a shooting spree at the Ashburton Work and Income Office. It came during the opening of the Crown's case against the 49-year-old who was charged with shooting dead Peggy Noble and Lee Cleveland, the attempted murder of their colleagues Lindy Curtis and Kim Adams, firearms charges and setting a man trap. Conan Young is covering the case, and he joins me now from outside the High Court in Christchurch. Hi Conan, what was said in court today about that day in September 2014?
Well, the Crown lawyer today, in opening his case, Andrew McRae, said that day really started as any other day, but that normality was really flipped on its head when Russell Tully entered the office wearing a balaclava and carrying a shotgun. He said his first victim was Peggy Noble, the receptionist. He said the Crown lawyer said that she was shot at point blank range. The next victim, the Crown says, was Kim Adams. She was fired at as she attempted to run from the building through the back door, and she reports feeling the bullet whiz past her head. The next victim, according to the Crown, was Lindy Curtis. She was fired on in her office. The Crown said that she only managed to save herself by lifting her leg at the moment the shot was fired, and so the shot hit her leg instead of her torso, which the Crown says would have actually killed her. However, Lee Cleveland was not so lucky. She was also in her office carrying under her desk, and Russell Tully allegedly went into her office, shot once, then went away, and then actually returned to the office after apparently hearing her and shot 2 more times to finish the job, as the Crown said. The Crown then said that here Russell Tully left the office calmly, removing his balaclava as he left.
Evidence heard from the Crown about the role a bystander played in helping place Mr Tully at the scene?
That's right. This is David Coos, who witnessed the shooting in the office. He actually left the office and ran after Russell Tully, incredibly really, and said to him that he called him a coward, and the Crown said he actually managed to hold Russell Tully up as he was attempting to unlock his mountain bike from outside. The Crown said that this resulted in Russell Tully actually leaving his helmet behind, and tests that were carried out on this helmet later on revealed traces of Mr Tully's DNA. The Crown said that definitively placed Russell Tully at the scene.
Tell me about the articles police say that Russell Tully had nearby him when he was arrested, Conan.
Well, look, 7 hours after the shooting, the Crown says Russell Tully was found hiding in a hedge. Nearby him, he had a semi-automatic shotgun, not the same weapon that was allegedly used in the shooting. He also had a piece of paper there that had the names Kim Adams and Lee Cleveland written on there. Remember, they were the 2 of the alleged victims. And then, that was when he was arrested, those items were found.
Conan, have the Crown ascribed a motive? What do they think was behind the shooting?
Well, the Crown says, I forgot to mention as well, on that piece of paper, as well as the names, was the word discrimination. That goes to the heart of what the Crown says was behind this case. The Crown says that Russell Tully had a beef with Kim Adams and Lee Cleveland in particular over the help that they had been trying to give him in finding accommodation in Ashburton. They said that Russell Tully was unhappy with the help they'd provided him, and they said this was in spite of staff in the Winds office actually going above and beyond to really help him.
Conan, one final question. Mr Tully himself is defending himself, but he wasn't in court. Why not? What can you tell us about this?
Yeah, he wasn't in court. The reasons for his absence have been suppressed. The judge, Justice Cameron Manda, made a point of reminding the jury, which includes 4 men and 8 women, that they were to carry out their duties as if he was in court and to ignore the fact that he wasn't there. They were, as I said, his reasons for not being in court have been suppressed.
Conan Young, who was in the High Court in Christchurch today. Thanks so much, Conan. Live from outside the court. Just coming up to 29 minutes past 5. Leilani coming up with news headlines in a moment. But first, Brendan McCullum's international cricket career has come to an end. The Black Caps lost the second test against Australia in Christchurch this afternoon by 7 wickets. But that has not taken the shine off McCullum's great contribution to the sport in New Zealand. He retires with more than 14,000 runs to his name over 3 cricket formats and with New Zealand's highest ever Test score of 302. As captain, he's also changed the team's playing style to become more attacking, aggressive, and has instilled the belief that the Black Caps are good enough to compete with any other team on the world stage. At his post-match media conference, he told reporters he has no regrets about his decision to retire after 261 days and incredibly 101 consecutive tests.
The time's right, It sort of came to that realisation when I made the decision, and I knew I could steel myself for another couple of challenges, and now walk away comfortable with my decision, and looking forward to the next stage of my life, and spend some time with the family, and take up some other challenges as well. And I think the team's at that stage as well, that they're ready for a new leader and a slightly new direction as well. And hopefully I've left and brought some fun and enjoyment and some real, culture back into the setup during the time that I had as captain.
McCullum was asked about his one standout moment in the Black Caps, and he selected the Test New Zealand played against Pakistan and the United Arab Emirates following the death of Philip Hughes, where he went on to score what was, at the time, the fastest ever Test century for a New Zealander.
Probably no one isolated moment. I think Sharjah was a huge moment for us as a team. And that was a catalyst for, I think, a lot of the free-flowing cricket which we've seen as, I guess, without the inhibitions of worrying about what may go wrong. We almost stumbled through tragedy on a style of play for us which kind of worked. And that was a really tough time to be involved and to be an international cricketer, let alone a captain, when you've got to ask your team to go out there and play a game during those circumstances. But I think it galvanised us as a group as well, and I think, I look back proudly on how our guys stuck together and really built a lot of the soul of our group during that.
McCullum says his actual black cap will always hold pride of place somewhere, and he's happy he's leaving the team in very good hands.
I think we've been able to get the enjoyment and the culture spot on, and everyone's very relaxed, and we play the game for the right reasons, and everyone's bought into that. I think what we'll see with the transition to the next group of leaders is that they're a little bit younger, they're probably a little bit more professional than what I am as well. I'm probably a little bit more old school, and I think that will assist in being able to take the team to a more consistent level. I think if there's one criticism of us, we've probably been a little bit inconsistent, albeit with flashes of brilliance. I think the next stage for this team is to reach a high-performing level, which is on a consistent basis, and I think those group of leaders have got that in front of them.
Now retired Black Caps captain Brendan McCullum. The time on Checkpoint is 28 minutes to 6. Coming up, we go back to Fiji. The death toll has risen to 42. More from Leilani about that in a moment. We're going to talk to the aid agencies about their coordination of relief efforts up there. South Auckland locals and environmentalists are shocked independent commissioners have given the go-ahead for a large four-lane highway. We hear from some of the affected landowners and much more coming up over the next hour. But first, here's Leilani Mamoisia with the headlines.
The trial of double murder accused Russell Tully has heard the 49-year-old intended to kill everyone working at the Ashburton Work and Income Office during a shooting spree in 2014. He's charged with shooting dead Peggy Noble and Lee Cleveland and the attempted murder of two colleagues. During his opening address, the Crown lawyer Andrew McRae told the jury Russell Tully was intent on killing as many staff members as possible. More food and water is being rolled out to evacuation centres in some of the worst hit parts of Fiji after Cyclone Winston killed at least 42 people. A government official met with local and international aid organisations in Western Fiji today, advising them on how to help in the aftermath of the cyclone. A Tear Fund spokesperson, John Watson, says some of the camps were running out of food and water and that it was one of the government's key priorities. Discussions are heated in the opening hours of what will be a lengthy Auckland Council meeting over housing density. A group of councillors want the council to withdraw its latest stance to be put to an independent panel considering the city's unitary plan. A vote on whether the council will change its evidence to the unitary panel is expected this evening. The organiser of the crowdfunding campaign to buy Awaroa Beach says he hopes all those who pledged money to buy the beach have their money ready so the deal can be finalised. The successful bid was confirmed after 11th hour negotiations late last night. Nearly 40,000 New Zealanders pledged more than $2 million to buy the land in Abel Tasman National Park. The deal was secured after the government and a yet-to-be-named donor put in money. And it's 26 to 6.
Thanks, Leilani, very much indeed. The death toll in Fiji is 42, with reports entire villages have been wiped out on remote islands. Aid agencies and the New Zealand Defence Force just starting to get to some of these islands. Now, the Fijian government says it fears the number will rise further as relief teams reach isolated communities. We're just trying to get Alice Clements from UNICEF, who's at Rakiraki. And we are going to talk to her the moment she is available, because she is working on coordinating relief efforts up there. So we hope to talk to her soon. But let's now update business news with business editor Giles Beckford. Giles, 4 companies who reported their results today epitomise really the changing nature of our investment scene.
Yes, good afternoon, John. They certainly do. 2 of those companies are energy companies. These are the part privatised Genesis and Meridian. Now, ignore the one-off movements that we have and that hit their bottom line, which is the value of their contracts for hedging their supply and the volatility in prices. The underlying profits were marginally firmer, just a tad. The demand is largely flat, and there's no big spending plans because there's no real demand there, and there's no need for new power stations at this stage, at least. So they're pretty flush with cash, and they're giving better dividends, or in Meridian's case, a special dividend. And from that point of view, they've always been staples of the New Zealand investment scene. Utility stocks, they're very defensive, they're cash rich. And generally they give you a good dividend yield, and that's why they're quite popular as sort of foundation stones for people's investment portfolios. KiwiSaver accounts will just be laden with shares from these companies. Contrast that with the new sector, the hot sector on the block, which is retirement villages, rest home operators. MetLife Care and Somerset, they're number 2 and 3 in the industry, and today they saw their bottom lines blossoming on rising property values, so there's a capital gain there, although they don't account for it in a cash sense. And they're seeing rising sales. They've got really big plans for expansion, new rest homes, particularly in the upper North Island, Auckland, Bay of Plenty, Waikato, growth area for stocks. Consequently, MetLife, for instance, MetLife Care, their shares, they ended up 7% today. So there's 2 sides of the investing scene, and you have to say that you know, it's in good heart at least.
Yeah. Anyone else stand out today, Giles, from the reporting season?
Well, we had 12 companies reporting today. I mean, it was a complete and utter deluge. I think 2 that probably are worth some mention. Refining New Zealand, who run Marsden Point. They've been making hay while the sun's shining. Low world oil prices mean that they are just creaming it. $151 million profit. Last year they made $10 million. So they're seeing, they're making the most of it. The reason why is because their margins are so good. There's such a gap between the price of the raw material and the price that we pay at the pump as motorists. The other one was PGG Wrightson's, which is one of those staples of the agricultural services business. Big network of stock and station agents around the country. Now, agriculture's not in the greatest heart, especially dairy at the moment. But they made quite a creditable, what was it, $16 million. The profit was down around 18%. But they're saying, by and large, farmers aren't panicking. They're being sensible, and the business is holding up. So, you know, it's not a doom-laden sector, and perhaps in an economic sense, we might take some heart of that. This is a sector which earns nearly half of our exports, so we can't ignore it.
Okay, so it's sort of fairly bullish. Reports back today at the height of the season. What happened on the markets overall?
Well, the market liked it. The top 50 index up 54 points. That's just under 1%, 6,230. You would think after all that volatility we're still in the doldrums. We're 100 points off a record level, which we'll probably make, I would think, by the end of the week if we carry on like this. Kiwi dollar quite steady at 66.2 US cents and 92.2 Australian.
Giles Beckford, our business editor. Thanks very much indeed, Giles. Talk to you tomorrow night. Let's try and work out what's going on in Fiji with the aid agencies. We're desperately trying to get Alice Clements. We can't get hold of her. She's with UNICEF up there, but we have been able to get through to Vivian Maderborn, who is UNICEF New Zealand's Chief Executive and is joining us by phone. Hi, Viv. Lovely to talk to you as always. What is the latest with getting aid in? Because the problem is that where the damage is worst is also the hardest to get to, right?
That's right, and the hardest to communicate with, as you were discovering.
Well, we know a lot more, John. That's the main thing. And what we know is that the devastation on those outer islands in the Western District is severe and serious. The government have requested 2,000 tents for school facilities just in the last day. That we know that personal first aid kits and hygiene and water purification is critical to prevent waterborne illness. That's a major concern now over the next few days. There's lots of surface water, lots of sewage, lots of just stuff on the ground that's not hygienic, and there's nowhere else to be. There's no building. So, we know more of that. We know that with the Fijian government's request for international help, the international experts in getting water up and running again and getting water sources purified, getting sanitation systems working, that whole network of people has gone into action. With our Navy, I don't know what the right nautical term is.
Yeah, Canterbury and Wellington, they're heading up there, aren't they? Yeah.
Yes, that's right. So that means people like UNICEF are getting supplies into the country on public airlines over the next couple of days. That'll get loaded into the Canterbury and the Wellington, and that'll go up this weekend. I think from a New Zealand point of view, NFAT, our Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, through us and other aid organisations, had pre-positioned supplies in Fiji. They've now been deployed. So the enormous amount of gear, tarpaulins, tents, immediate needs, water buckets, purification, all of that is already being deployed. And you just have to reflect how fast that is.
Yeah, it's really fast. Look, you guys, the NGOs and the government and the New Zealand Defence Force are getting really, really good at this, which is sad that you have to be so good at it, but practice makes perfect. The issue, though, is that it is less than 12 months since you were doing exactly the same in Vanuatu, and I just wonder, do you have the tarpaulins? Do you have the tents? Do you have the water purification pills? Were you stocked up with enough stuff to go?
Yes, I mean, I think that's what the power of a sort of global organisation does. The issue isn't having the stuff that's all there in our Copenhagen warehouses. The issue is having it in the right places of the world to be used fast. And this pre-positioning of supplies that the New Zealand government is helping us with is a real breakthrough in thinking and in speed and responsiveness. I think the island everyone's most concerned about is Koru Island, right? Because that, when the meteorologists trace the path of the storm, that really the eye of the cyclone seems to have just whacked through that island. What reports have you had from up there? Well, that's the report we've had. There's a decimated community infrastructure. There's very mucked up water supplies. There aren't places for people to shelter, so the risk of waterborne illness is high. And also, you think about it from just a very human level. If you're a mum with a newborn baby and you're trying to breastfeed and you haven't got clean water, you haven't got a warm place to sit, you haven't got quiet because there's helicopters and chainsaws and your ability to keep breastfeeding is really challenged. And that for a young baby in this circumstance is a life-challenging threat, because if you have to come off breastfeeding, then there's no clean water for formula. So, I like to think of it both at that high level, what do we need to do, with the cluster groups and the humanitarian organisation that, as you say, gets better and better. But I also want to pause and think about it from an individual person's point of view, like a young child who has nowhere to play except outside, and there's sewage, groundwater, it kind of makes it real, the size of the challenge.
Vivian Maderborn, who is the head of UNICEF New Zealand. Thanks so much, Vivian. Yes, we were talking After 5 o'clock, immediately after 5 o'clock, if you've just tuned in with a woman called Maramadan from Raki Raki, she described exactly what Vivian was talking about. Her village just completely decimated. Everything gone, everything. And their sense of having to start again when their gardens have gone, their homes have gone, their fresh water has gone. Obviously, they're not insured. How do you start again in those circumstances? They just have to, I guess, but they need help. Let's go back to the Awaroa story with the time at 5:45. New Zealanders pledged $2.278 million towards the Able Tasman Beach campaign. It is New Zealand's biggest crowdfunding campaign ever and the biggest ever run by Give a Little. Now, if you know about Give a Little, you know about Give a Little, but if you don't, and if you don't understand crowdfunding, well, we're about to give you a kind of 101 guide. The difference between this campaign, though, and other Give a Little fundraisers is that donors pledge support rather than donating money straight away, because if there wasn't enough money to buy the land, then it wasn't going to be taken from people. Now that the tender has been successful, Give a Little has the task of collecting the pledged funds. Tony Bai is Give a Little's chief giving officer. I asked him if he'd ever seen anything like this.
No, certainly not. It's by far and away our largest campaign, by quite a long shot.
So how many people in the end donated money?
It's just over 39,000.
And how many people in the end visited the site? Have you any idea?
Several 100,000. Not an exact figure.
So there was an extraordinary degree of public interest in this.
That's right, yeah.
What was it? Do you have any idea what captured the public imagination about this?
I think we can mostly point to Dwayne and Adam for that. You know, they've used the site regularly to update the crowd as to what they're doing and how it's progressing, and that's really worked in their favour. And then obviously the media have picked up on it and run with it.
Yeah, and so you use the term the crowd. This is crowdfunding, right?
Absolutely.
For people who don't really know what crowdfunding is, this is a whole lot of people all donating to the one cause.
Correct.
Why are Give a Little involved in being the collection point?
Right, it's a good question. So Give a Little is owned by the Spark Foundation, and the Spark Foundation in turn is funded by Spark New Zealand. So our reason for existing is to enable people to start a page for a social cause and then attract funds. So where there really is an enabler or a facilitator, and we don't take a judgment call on whether or not you think it is a good cause, we let the crowd decide that. So when a page is created, the only test we apply to it is the language of the page defamatory or hate speech, and also we make sure it's very clear. As long as it passes that test, we don't take any further judgment on whether it's a good cause.
And there are no charges attached to it. You don't clip the ticket or have any facility fee or any charges at all, full stop.
That's right. At the moment, the Spark Foundation underwrites all the costs of processing payments and the work behind the scenes.
When you say at the moment, of course, I immediately, as a journalist, leap to the conclusion that you may not be doing that forever, that at some stage.
Certainly not. I mean, that is the case at present, is that we...
Because it must be becoming quite expensive for the Spark Foundation, right?
Yes, it's a very intensive exercise for us to run that, but that's a reason for our existence, is to offer that to New Zealanders.
Okay, let's look at the Awaroa case. So these 39,000 people donate money. How do you know the money is going to turn up? How does that work?
Do you mean in the sense of being paid through to...
Yeah. So I get really excited. I hear, I'm listening to Checkpoint, I get carried away. I think I'm going to donate $100, but actually I don't have the $100. How does that happen?
So most of the pages on Give a Little are actually run on a donation basis, and what that means is when a donor commits their funds, we charge their credit card or debit card straight away. In the case of the Awaroa Inlet, it's actually been run on a pledge basis, and what that means is that nothing happens until the target is met. The target in this case was $2 million. Unlike other pledge-based campaigns, in this instance we also decided to wait another week or so until the tender was accepted before we started to draw down funds. So that's what's happening today. As of today, people who have pledged, their bank accounts will now be deducted from the funds.
And is there a history of people pledging and not being able to pay, or by and large, do the people who pledge deliver?
By and large, they do deliver. So there has been some communication today around the level of what we call default. That certainly is the absolute worst case we would expect. And I should stress that Dwayne and Adam have been aware of that from day dot, and we have all along been managing expectations such that should there be a large level of default, that wouldn't be an issue for the tender acceptance.
And do you have any idea what the level is so far?
Yes, I do. I mean, it is early days. It's taking us a bit of time to process those pledges, not understandably, given there is nearly 40,000 of them. But so far we're running at less than half of the risk factor that has been stated in the media earlier today, which obviously gives us a sense of comfort. We also have a large number of people contacting us saying they are aware they may not make the payment. How can they honour their commitment? So we go into this with a very high sense of comfort that there isn't much risk there. And I should stress that Dwayne has put together a tender offer that includes, by and large, Give a Little pledges, but also other funders. And it is our requirement to release funds to Dwayne and Adam that we are confident the tender will be met. If we weren't confident, then we wouldn't have started drawing down funds. So while there is some risk there, we have a plan in place to manage that, and you'll see that rolled out over the next day or two, and the risk is very minimal.
So basically, what you're here to say is New Zealand is getting Awaroa.
Yeah, I'd say it's a very high chance at this stage. Dwayne's done an incredible job of pulling that together, and certainly in terms of actually taking payment, that is running as well as it possibly could.
Tom Byer, Give a Little's Chief Giving Officer, spoke to him about 4:30. The Ministry of Health says it's up to doctors and specialists to learn about the lung disease bronchiectasis, which is on the rise in children. But some doctors disagree, saying given the number of people dying from it each year has doubled in the last decade to 84 now, the government has a role to play. Laura Bootham reports.
The ministry says it recognises the serious implications of the disease, but neither it nor the government are in charge of training doctors. But Ines Asher, who is a paediatrician at Starship Hospital, says the ministry does need to take a leadership role. Dr Asher says the increasing rates and severity of bronchiectasis is extremely alarming, and cold, damp and overcrowded housing is partly to blame. She says there needs to be a ministry-led campaign to raise awareness, similar to that done for rheumatic fever.
We certainly would like to see some more effective action. And of course, this isn't just a Ministry of Health issue. It's an intersectorial issue involving the housing sector, the income sector, and the education sector. But the ministry could take a lead, or should in fact take a lead, because the outcomes are health issues. So, yes, there's a lot more to be done, and the government really needs to get in behind this, because our children, we're just really, to be honest, we're maiming our children by letting this continue.
Stephen Lucas, a visiting paediatrician and researcher from Uppsala University Children's Hospital in Sweden, agrees. Dr Lucas says he was surprised by New Zealand's high bronchiectasis rates, considering cases are very rare in Sweden. He says it would be logical for the ministry to have a campaign to increase awareness.
If there are areas that can be identified where either we can find these children earlier by due diligence within schools or healthcare, that's definitely information that has to be spread in order to catch the kids earlier.
The president of the Paediatric Society, David Newman, says it's getting to the point where bronchiectasis can't be ignored anymore. He says while it's the responsibility of those who train doctors to make them aware of the disease, the government needs to create a national strategy that addresses the problem and contributors, such as poor housing.
Health professionals who've identified the problem need to work with their professional groupings, such as the respiratory physicians, paediatricians, working with the ministry to develop a strategy that will address these issues.
The Asthma and Respiratory Foundation also wants the government to do more to support the health sector in combating it and other respiratory diseases. Its National Research Manager, Kathy Liss, says the Ministry of Health needs to provide the tools for training organisations and doctors to identify and diagnose bronchiectasis.
We think that the government can take a lead role in acknowledging respiratory disease as a national health priority. Bronchiectasis is one of our chronic respiratory diseases, and altogether they make up a third of our deaths in New Zealand as a group, and yet respiratory disease is not in the top long-term conditions of focus at the Ministry of Health.
Kathy Liss says the ministry should adopt its national respiratory strategy to bring down the rates. This is Laura Bootham.
The Ministry of Health's Chief Advisor for Child and Youth Health, Dr Pat Tui, says it's been working closely with Asthma and Respiratory Foundation people, and they're now in the process of preparing a report to the Minister about how it should respond to the issues they raise. 6 minutes to 6. Crayfish and snapper numbers are falling at the Goat Island Marine Reserve north of Auckland, and scientists say it's due to commercial fishing on the boundary there. The government is proposing to turn the inner Hauraki Gulf into a recreational fishing park, but those plans don't include crayfish. Our conservation reporter Alexa Cook has more.
More than 350,000 people visit the Goat Island Marine Reserve at Lee each year, but the numbers of crayfish and snapper are now lower than before the reserve was created in 1975. Dr Nick Shears from the University of Auckland's Lee Marine Laboratory says crayfish numbers are low because they move out to the 800-metre reserve boundary to feed and end up in commercial cray pots.
The fishermen have done well out of this fishery for years, but what's happening now is without replenishment into the fishery, and this is sort of seen for the whole northeastern New Zealand, the crayfish fishery is going through a bit of a low patch at the moment, and what we're seeing is that's translating into low numbers inside the reserve as well. So basically the fishermen, by fishing the boundary, are fishing down the numbers inside the reserve.
He says commercial fishing on the boundary started in the early 90s and it should be extended to 3 kilometres from shore so the crayfish have a chance to feed without being caught. The Lee Commercial Fishermen's Association supports the reserve but won't comment on the effects of extending the boundary. In a statement, it suggests that increasing visitor numbers may be affecting biodiversity within the marine reserve and surrounding areas. One group has spent several years working on a Hauraki Gulf marine spatial plan to protect the marine environment. John Campbell, who's part of the group, says they don't want their plans overridden by the government's proposed recreational fishing park. He says he's concerned that the government hasn't addressed different fisheries.
We need to look at all the stresses that are happening, and one relates to the other. We do know that we want increased fish stock, particularly around snapper. I'm also concerned about crayfish. Crayfish really is declined, and that's not in the recreational reserve, which the Minister is advocating for, which shows a bit disappointing.
Mr Tregedia says he doesn't have an issue with commercial fishing, but he does with their techniques.
I have no trouble with long liners, but I certainly have trouble with some of the trawling that is happening with nets. But then I can go back and talk about the amount of activity that's happening commercially in charter boats. Charter boats are putting a lot of people on the water and collecting a lot of fish.
Instead of complete no fishing reserves, he'd like to see fishing allowed when fish stocks are abundant. But Nick Shears says that would prevent long-term biodiversity gains. As well as a drop in snapper and crayfish, Mr Shears says reef fish stocks outside the reserve are also suffering.
We're seeing higher abundances in the reserve, and that's due to a decline outside the reserve with this increasing pressure from new fishing technique, big increase in spearfishing, and just an increasing population. All of these changes and increased pressure on the environment is just associated with a growing population in Auckland.
He says reserves will increase in value as more areas are overfished, and it's more important than ever to make sure they are designed properly and with the right boundaries. For Checkpoint, this is Alexa Cook.
We're going to look now at this 4-lane highway in South Auckland. Auckland Transport says part of more than 250 properties will be acquired under the Public Works Act. What does that mean? Tom Furley reports.
Eve Osborne bought her 8,000 square metre property on Redoubt Road in 2011. She was issued with a notice of requirement the following year, with her property set to make way for the highway through Redoubt and Mill Roads.
To come back with their answer to say in 51 pages that they agree with everything AT has proposed and that they've considered all the aspects is flabbergasting. We didn't expect that at all.
She says she doesn't know what the fate of her home will be, with Auckland Transport having 10 years to make up their mind under the notice. Annabelle Hadrill has lived on Redoubt Road for 46 years. She, like many others who submitted on the plans in a hearing last September, was sent the Commissioner's recommendation on Monday.
Well, I got a lump in my throat, to be quite honest. I just sort of thought, it's just so sad, really, because, Redoubt Road has always been quite an iconic sort of ridge, and we've got, this beautiful Totra Park, which is so precious to keep today. There's so few now around Auckland.
Ms Hadrill says the whole process has been unfair, and she feels as if the commissioners haven't listened to residents' concerns or fully considered the alternatives. She says the only option is to appeal to the Environment Court, but admits that might be too hard.
We'd like to, but we just haven't got the funds to do it. We even went and spoke to a lawyer, just had, honestly, I don't know what it was, an hour's meeting to get his advice on whether we had a case or not. He came back and said, yes, he thought we did have a case, and sent us a bill for $3,500 for telling us that we had a case.
Part of the proposed road passes through an area of native bush on Mill Road called Cheeseman's Bush. Forest and Bird member Graham Fuller has campaigned to protect the area.
It's a significant part of our natural biodiversity and natural heritage, and as long as this sort of thing keeps happening, we're losing these things. They are not replaceable.
He says the arguments against the route have fallen on deaf ears. Auckland Transport declined to comment at this stage of the process. The Commissioners found the assessment of alternative routes and plans were adequate and says while the project will have some adverse effects, they can be avoided, fixed or mitigated. Auckland Transport will now consider whether to accept the recommendation and conditions attached to it and says that may take several months.
Tom Furley. Kia ora everyone, you are listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm John Campbell. Thank you for joining us. Coming up in the next half hour, we are going to go back to Fiji for the latest on relief and recovery efforts. We're going to look at rental costs in Wellington. They have gone up a lot. Why and what's the impact? And school uniforms. Massey gets to respond to its own students who were a bit cross about it all last night. All of that and more coming up in the next 30 minutes. But first, here's the news with Leilani Mamoisia.
Kia ora, good evening. The trial of double murder accused Russell Tully has heard the 49-year-old intended to kill everyone working at the Ashburton Work and Income Office during a shooting spree in 2014. Mr Tully is charged with shooting dead Peggy Noble and Lee Cleveland, the attempted murder of their colleagues Lindy Curtis and Kim Adams, firearms charges and setting a man trap. Conan Young is covering the case.
During his opening address, the Crown lawyer Andrew McRae said Russell Tully was intent on killing as many staff members as possible, but was also bent on targeting Lee Cleveland and Kim Adams, who he had a grievance against. Mr McRae said the receptionist, Peggy Noble, was his first victim and died instantly. He said Kim Adams felt the bullet intended for her fly past her head as she ran for the door. The lawyer said Lindy Curtis only survived by raising her leg at the moment the shot was fired. He said Lee Cleveland was not as fortunate and died after being shot 3 times by Mr Tully as she cowered under her desk. At the High Court in Christchurch, Conan Young.
In Fiji, thousands of cyclone victims are starting to rebuild their devastated homes themselves because no help has yet come. The death toll from Cyclone Winston has risen to 42 and nearly 20,000 people are in evacuation centres. A mother of 4 children in a centre in Rakiraki says families are helping each other until government assistance comes through. Miliakere Dakuitonga is at the Penang Sangam High School with 7 other families. They're staying in the hall as there is extensive damage to parts of the school and are waiting for food to arrive. Ms Dakuitonga says it's washing day today, and while they work and wait, they are helping each other.
We're just trying to help each other with the food and water, since government's not, like the relief from the government is not that quick, so we're just helping each other with whatever we have.
Miliakere Dakuitonga says she was shaken and her house is a disaster, but she is grateful to be alive. A Health Department official confirmed food is on the way. Reports are now coming through from Koro Island, one of the worst hit. Aid workers and local media arriving on the island report entire villages have been wiped out. The man behind the crowdfunding project to buy Awaroa Beach says it was a donation from Joyce Fisher Philanthropic Trust that helped seal the $2.8 million deal. The successful bid was confirmed after 11th hour negotiations late last night. Nearly 40,000 New Zealanders pledged more than $2.25 million to buy the land in Abel Tasman National Park. The government pitched in $350,000, which will come from the Nature Heritage Fund. The campaign organiser, Dwayne Major, told Checkpoint the Joyce Fisher Trust gave $250,000.
Philanthropic Trust came in, saw the philanthropy aspect of this, and they said, we're prepared to underwrite. And then, after a short period of time, they realised, actually, no, we're going to donate.
Christchurch businessman Dwayne Major, who was behind the Awaroa Beach crowdfunding. Amnesty International says it's alarming New Zealand continues to detain asylum seekers in remand prisons. The organisation has just released its annual report on the state of the world's human rights and says New Zealand still has plenty of room for improvement, including its treatment of asylum seekers. Amnesty's Executive Director in New Zealand, Grant Belden, says about 10 asylum seekers are being held at Mount Eden and Waikarea remand prisons, with one being detained since March last year. He says they haven't been detained because they've done anything criminal. Mr Belden says there have been cases where asylum seekers have been assaulted by other prisoners. The Taranaki Regional Council is investigating a complaint that seismic surveying explosives have been laid just metres away from a South Taranaki farm's principal water source. Jeanette Wilson says 2 kilos of explosives have been set into the ground only 10 metres from a well at the Okaiwa property she lives on. Our Taranaki reporter Robin Martin has more.
The council's rules say seismic surveying explosives must be laid 100 metres away from any well or bore used for water supply. Ms Wilson says the well supplies water to her home, the milking shed and troughs, and if it is damaged the farm won't be able to function. She says when she complained to the surveying company, BTW, she was told it was too late to do anything about it. Shell, which is behind the survey, says a number of people have raised concerns, but it would not discuss the specifics of individual cases. This is Robin Martin.
The Black Caps cricket captain Brendan McCullum says his final test has been marked by disappointment and relief. New Zealand lost the second test to Australia by 7 wickets this afternoon, with the tourists claiming a 2-0 series win. It was McCullum's 101st and last test. While disappointed he couldn't sign off with a win, he's happy his Black Caps journey has come to an end.
The right team won and we threw everything at them at key times, but they were able to withstand us. And it's not the ideal way to go out, but at the same time, I've had a great time and even just being involved in this Test match as well at home and the ovations which I've received and obviously like the Guard of Honour and things like that. It's memories which I'll take with me forever.
Brendan McCullum. Meanwhile, the Australian captain Steve Smith has been charged with dissent for his role in a confrontation with umpire Ramor Martinez. And Australia have just won the third women's one-dayer against New Zealand in Mount Maunganui by 6 wickets to take a 2-1 series win. The Highlanders have named a blockbusting back three for their Super Rugby opener against the Blues in Auckland on Friday night. Ben Smith is at fullback with his All Blacks teammate Waisake Naholo on the right wing and Patrick Osborne on the left. And the New Zealand women's hockey team have drawn 2-2 with Argentina in the first of 6 tests at Mar del Plata. And that's the news.
The day New Zealand bought a beach.
Pretty flippin' amazing. I think we've done something special. We've pulled something amazing off as a country, and I'm really glad that we've been able to announce it in the morning, hopefully before the kids get to school.
The government chips in.
It has been a complicated tender process, so we came in again last night and topped it up so that we would not lose it.
And getting back the bucket.
Take it somewhere public and just drop it. We'll be quite happy as long as it's not damaged. And so, we just want our little bucket back.
Moments that matter. Susie Ferguson and Guy Aspinall, Morning Report, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, spending on pokie machines is growing faster in Tauranga than any other city, and there are calls for the council to act. And after 10, British space scientist and the Sky at Night presenter Maggie Adderin-Pocock on getting children engaged in science and space. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
And Met Service weather to midnight tomorrow. In the west from Waikato to Wellington, including Bay of Plenty and the central high country, cloudy at times, patchy drizzle about Bay of Plenty, Horowhenua and Kapiti tomorrow morning, all clearing by midday. For the remainder of North Island, fine weather. Nelson, Marlborough and North Canterbury, fine with variable high cloud. South Canterbury, Otago and Southland, increasing high cloud. Scattered rain developing but gradually clearing from the north tomorrow afternoon and evening. In Bulla, a few showers, mainly about the coast, clearing tomorrow afternoon. Westland and Fiordland, rain spreading north with heavy fall south of Harihari, gradually easing tomorrow. And Chatham Islands is mainly fine, and it's 6:09.
Thank you very much, Leilani. You often don't hear about Harihari, and it's been in the weather constantly in the past few days, so I'll be loving it. Let's go back to Fiji. New Zealand is ramping up its relief efforts for Fiji as the death toll from Cyclone Winston continues to climb. It stands at 42, but there is an expectation that will grow. Nearly 20,000 people are now in evacuation centres. That's a huge number. People in rural areas have complained that government relief supplies are not reaching them 4 days after that Category 5 cyclone caused extensive destruction. But Director of the National Disaster Management Office, Akapusi Tuifangalele, says distributing aid on a house-to-house basis is logistically too difficult, and if people need food and water, they should go to those evacuation centres. The New Zealand Navy multi-vessel HMNZS Canterbury will leave for Fiji this weekend, supported by the offshore patrol vessel HMNZS Wellington, which will go a bit later. Royal New Zealand Air Force aircraft are also up there in the air already in support of Fiji. RNZ News reporter Kim Baker-Wilson is in Fiji. He's been travelling around. I think you're back near or in Nandi. Kim, earlier you connected us with Marama Dunn at that evacuation centre, and I thought her story was just shatteringly raw because she has lost everything. Her village has gone and they don't know where to start again. And with 20,000 people in evacuation centres, there's going to be so many stories like that, aren't there?
Yeah, that was quite hard watching her speak to you. She started crying almost immediately, and her hand was up to her face very quickly, wiping away the tears. They were just pouring out of her there. Look, the evacuation centres, I just heard you talking there that if people want food and water, they should go to evacuation centres. The one that we were in today was by no stretch a nice place to be. We've heard from the local town council in Raki, where we were today, that the evacuation centres are overcrowded. He used the word jam-packed. The one that we were in today was affected by the cyclone itself. It's in a school. Much of the roof is gone. Much of it you can't go into. The bit that the people, the evacuees are in, the ceiling is leaking. The floor is wet. Lots of children, lots of elderly people as well. Water, they say they do have water coming out of taps, and that was the case there. They were able to do washing, but they say it's quite intermittent. In fact, there were people there doing hand washing, and you can imagine that how many clothes people are trying to bring with them. The hand washing that involves, they're doing that while they have water, because they say the water will just, without any notice, disappear again. So if they don't start doing the washing and trying to clean what they have left, when that water comes, the water will just disappear again.
Kim, Fiji is a poor country, obviously, and this was a terrible cyclone, the strongest in recorded history in Fiji. But nonetheless, Raki is not that far from Nandi. There must now be a growing sense of frustration. Is there, that it's taking so long to get essential supplies to people who are that close to a main centre?
I think so. The town official that we were talking to today, he says he thinks the government is working on plans, but then he said, look, the government hasn't told us what it's doing. Alex Perrottet from Radio New Zealand International and I were just remarking today how good a condition the roads are in. The roads themselves haven't suffered. And we thought by now, especially the distance that we've been driving, we'd be seeing trucks delivering aid or people delivering tarpaulins. We didn't see any of that today at all, but what we did see was flattened village after flattened village. And I know that's a phrase that you and I have been talking about and that people have been hearing over the last few days, but seeing those villages today was very confronting, and it's very hard to equate what we've been seeing today with the death toll and the injury toll not being higher than what it is. It's amazing that people survive this, but they are suffering. And they are calling out for help, and so far they're telling us that help has not been arriving.
Kim Baker-Wilson, who is now back in Nandi, having been travelling around. Thank you so much, Kim. Yes, 42 is the official death toll, but as we keep saying, there are a couple of islands still not visited yet by aid agencies or anyone who can describe what's happened there. The successful bid to buy the Abel Tasman beach was confirmed last night. This is Awaroa. After 11th hour negotiations, the deal was secured after the government put in extra money in a $250,000 donation from the Joyce Fisher Philanthropic Trust. Belinda McCammon reports.
Sephra Rayner, the granddaughter of the family who once owned the land, was lost for words when she heard today it now belonged to the public. Ms Rayner's grandparents sold the Awaroa property to Michael Spackman, and she recalls many happy summers in the lagoon and sand dunes.
You learn a respect for the land when you grow up on it and in it so much. Especially, I think, as New Zealanders, we appreciate what we've got here and how beautiful it is and try to preserve that. My sister's been shepherding for the last 7 years as well, and that experience with her, spending the time, definitely brings a new appreciation to what we've got here.
The organiser of the fundraising campaign, Dwayne Major, says the deal was done with no strings attached. He says that all New Zealanders that made pledges, including himself, need to make sure that they have their money ready to pay.
However, there was a very significant donor in the middle that came along initially as an underwriter that then became a donator, and then that sort of held us in the game. And then the government had about 150 on the table, and then, a surprise to me, right at the end came another 200, and that sort of confirmed the price.
The government said it pitched in $350,000 to the crowdfunding campaign to get it over the line late last night. The funding will come from the Nature Heritage Fund, which enables land to be bought for the conservation estate. The Conservation Minister, Maggie Barry, says the campaigners will now set up a trust or holding company to hold the land until it can be gazetted as part of the national park.
There were bidders who had a bit more money in the pot, it would seem, so we needed to ensure that the wider or the spirit of what was happening with this particular campaign wasn't stymied at the last.
The family of the chairperson of the Wakatu Incorporation, Paul Morgan, lived on the other side of the entrance to Awaroa, where most of the private houses are today. He says with the beach back in public hands, it's where it should be after it was taken by the Crown and sold.
It's gone full circle, but it doesn't underpin the critical issue, and that's the dubious quality of the title to that land in lieu of the land issues in that part of Tasman Bay not being resolved properly right in the very beginning.
Mr Morgan says Māori have been shut out of the area and want to be part of the park's future.
From Maraho to Wainui Bay, which is in the north end of the park, effectively, Māori, we've been completely shut out of that area, and we want better arrangements in terms of involvement in management and ability to establish places where we can fulfil our cultural responsibilities to our own people.
Paul Morgan wants an education program to help people understand the history of Awaroa Beach and the surrounding area. Dwayne Major agrees the value of the land is not just commercial.
The history of that land and that particular piece of land, needs to be the history of that needs to be made awareness and as a part of the telling of the story, and we need to honour all of those stories.
Dwayne Major says he would love for a celebratory service to be held at the beach, which he hopes as many New Zealanders as possible could attend. For Checkpoint, Belinda McCammon.
We're going to turn to a story we brought you last night on Checkpoint. The students who say they're sweltering in a new winter-only uniform at an Auckland school. More than 1,300 people have signed an online petition calling for a summer uniform for Massey High School. Massey is west of the city after some students reportedly suffered nosebleeds, headaches and discomfort in the heat. John Campbell is the head of Massey High School's Board of Trustees, and he joins me in the studio now. Firstly, I thought your students were delightful last night on Checkpoint, stating their case. They say, look, you've put us in a uniform that is way too hot. It is massively inappropriate for Auckland summers, which are sticky, muggy and warm. What do you say back?
We disagree. I mean, as we would. Yeah. I mean, the uniform basically is a new blazer, which we expect them to wear to school in the morning, and probably for another 25 minutes during the day when they're going from class to class.
Yeah.
There's no requirement for them to wear it in the classroom or on the way home when it's hot.
Do they have a jersey?
There is a jersey in the uniform.
But they don't have to wear the jersey?
No.
So what are you dressing the boys in? A blazer to go to school?
Blazer to go to school.
Yep.
Short sleeve shirt. They have an optional short sleeve shirt or just a summer type shirt.
Yeah.
A tie.
Yeah.
And long trousers.
Yeah.
Thin socks underneath and black shoes.
Yeah.
Very similar to what our senior uniform has always been, apart from the tie and blazer.
Now, that was what I was wearing at school 35 years ago.
So many schools with the same
hold on a
uniform.
sec, we had a summer uniform too, and I just wonder, that's fine in winter, but who wants, is there a 14-year-old boy on the planet who wants to wear long trousers on a summer's day?
Well, we had actually requests from our senior students, because our senior leader students have always been in that uniform, a blazer, tie, and we had requests from other students saying, hey, can we wear the same thing? And the stars sort of all aligned. This new uniform come around, we had a new principal. We'd had so many problems with our old uniform that had morphed over the years and caused many arguments between teachers and students about enforcing the standard. So we decided we'd go for a new uniform.
Okay, one size fits all.
That's consistent, unarguable what the rules are.
Yeah.
And simple.
Okay, what are the girls wearing? Are they wearing skirts down to their feet?
They have three options.
Yeah.
They have a calf-length skirt.
Yeah.
Which we expect students and teenagers being what they'll push back and they'll lift it up to the knee.
Yeah, yeah.
So our has the final discretion, but the board has said below the knee.
Yeah.
So it's a calf-length skirt.
This all sounds wonderfully old-fashioned of you.
Well, think what it's like. Long skirt or trousers. They have three options. We have a Samoan community in our school, an island community, who actually love the long skirt.
Okay. So maybe the argument is with the blazer. Why do they have to wear the blazer to school when it is 24 degrees and the humidity is 95 and it's horrid?
Well, I actually just checked this out. We've had a teacher. The average temperature in the morning in West Auckland has been 18.5 degrees, so it's not sweltering on the way to school.
So you disagree with the students and you think the uniform is appropriate for the school?
I think it's appropriate for the school. I don't think the blazers are appropriate in hot weather, and they're not required to wear it in hot weather.
Okay, thank you for fronting. John Campbell, who's the head of Massey High School's Board of Trustees. Wellington renters are being hit hard in the pocket with prices hitting a record high, average of $450 a week. That's average. The figures from Trade Me show landlords have hiked rents in the capital by $40 this year. That's average weekly increase. That's much higher than average across the country, with the median asking rent rising by $15 from December to January. What's going on in Welly? Here's Alexa Cook.
While Auckland is still the most expensive place to rent a house, with an average price of $500 a week, rents in Wellington are increasing at the fastest rate. Robert Whittaker from the Renters' Rights Group, Wellington Renters United, says with a well-known shortage of rental housing, it's unfair that landlords make the most of it.
We think that landlords are taking advantage of the high demand at this time of year to hike up the prices when tenants are desperate for housing. It affects students, obviously, but it also affects non-student renters. And we've seen for a while now that the kind of rental market is slowly aligning so that the majority of houses are being let at this time of year when landlords can demand the highest rent.
The organisation was started last year to help people campaign for better housing conditions, and Mr Whittaker says its membership is climbing. He's particularly worried for the many families on a single income who can't afford to buy a home and have rent soaking up most of their weekly budget. Robert Whittaker says he's frustrated rents are going up without the quality of properties improving.
In Wellington, we have a lot of old houses with poor insulation and dampness and all those sort of things. We're not paying more for more. We're paying more for the same because the demand is so high that every house is let. And there aren't houses sitting empty because they're too poor quality for renters. Renters need somewhere to live.
The head of Trade Me Property, Nigel Jeffries, says it's typical for landlords to adjust their rent in January, and Wellington is a classic example.
All the uni students are coming back, so supply is constricted and prices consequently head up. And also there is quite a lot of tenancy churn this bit of January.
Mr Jeffries says many students are wanting larger houses, and that is driving the average rent prices up.
The larger properties are up nearly 9.5% over the last year, up at $875, which is $100 more than Auckland. So it's one of those examples where you get the Wellington market with a dearth of larger houses, and the scarcity effect kicks in. A lot of student groups like the larger houses, but they're in short supply, hence the rents are heading up.
Nigel Jeffries says he doesn't expect prices to keep increasing monthly because they usually surge at the start of the year and then level off. In Wellington, for Checkpoint, Alexa Cook.
Let's change the subject entirely and go to Tokoroa, where John Berry has made homemade fly traps that he estimates kill, wait for it, 4.5 million flies each out of 200-litre plastic drums, recycled cans, and, well, rotting meat, fish and food donated from the Tokoroa community, from the local New World, local fish and chip shop. They go into the drums, they stink, the flies fly in, the rest for the flies anyway is history. John has told me what he built via Skype video.
Well, I've built some fly traps I'm putting around Tokoroa. They'll catch about 58 million flies before they're full, and that's largely because I really don't fancy eating them.
So how do you know that they'll catch 58 million flies? How did you work that out?
Well, first I used the Rescue brand fly traps. They used to be stocked at Bunnings, hint Bunnings, but they don't stock them anymore. And they are, I'd guess, around about 700 mils. And the Rescue people have actually counted how many flies go in their traps, and it's 20,000. So based on that, and based on the volume of the traps I had, it calculates out to 58 million flies of the 12 traps I've made.
So how do the traps work? They are very similar to the kind of domestic models that you maybe hang at the back of your house or whatever, are they? Well, it's like Hotel California. The flies can check in, but they can never leave.
Get out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it basically just attracts a lot of flies in, and they drown, they die from the ammonia in the air, and they just decay.
And what attracts them in there? You just put what at the bottom of the trap?
Cabbage is good for housefly, fish, raw meat, liver is good to attract blowfly, but quite frankly, whatever you put in there, flies will check it out.
Can you show us one for people who are watching, and for people who are listening, we will describe it as you do so, John.
Okay.
Now, for people listening on the radio, that sound is John walking through his house. So you're taking a trap inside?
Yes, it's the only way you're going to see it. And get an eyeful quickly, because it's not going to stay that way. So this is a $15 warehouse Pyroplast bin. The others I've made from farming bins. This one's 72 litres. And what happens is the flies see the cans here. It's hard to point this camera like this.
No, so you've got a bog standard rubbish bin, and your entry points are cans. Punctured cans.
A shade over the cans. Fly goes in there and can't get out.
So
and now put the trap out.
Wow. So you just attach some basic drink cans to the side of a rubbish bin. The flies fly in through the cans, and they just can't get out.
It's my house right now. Whoa. Okay. I did that because I love you, John Campbell.
That's very kind, John Berry. Thanks. Greater love hath no man. So, well, I know that I don't want to go on the record as being a fly advocate, because frankly I hate them. But is there a danger we can kill too many flies? Clearly you don't feel that way.
No, I mean, a single fly, I've done some research, a single fly lays 500 eggs in its lifetime. They hatch pretty quickly, so it doesn't take many flies to get a lot more flies. One sheep will produce about 1 million flies. There are between 120,000 and 200,000 species of fly. We're not going to kill them all.
No,
there are lots of things going extinct right now. Flies are not one of them.
No, okay, so we don't have to have a Save the Fly campaign. What's been the response in Tokoroa? How have people reacted to it?
Well, very positively. Mostly 1 or 2 people concerned about flies, but the rest are against flies and very much like to see them dead.
And have you noticed a difference already in terms of the pest factor of flies in your neighbourhood?
Up until I dragged the trap into my house, yes.
And now they're back. So you think they're already working?
Yeah, they are, definitely. And I've delivered them to some people, and I've only gone back to one person as yet, but they have said they've got fewer flies.
And so now this is going to be something that Tokoroa will do municipally, that the town is getting behind it, right?
Well, the people are. I hope the council does. So I'm going to put a bit of pressure on the council because it doesn't really cost anything, and it just makes summer a lot more fun to not have an excess number of flies. People are using over 1 can of fly spray a day, every day, to kill the flies in their house. That's disgusting. It doesn't smell good to have those chemicals. The chemicals are bad. The flies are bad. Let's get rid of both of them.
John Berry from Tokoroa. We've just got some breaking news coming in now. A small plane carrying at least 21 people has gone missing in West Nepal. The aircraft, operated by Tara Air, carrying 18 passengers. 2 of them foreigners, as far as understood, and 3 crew from Pokhara to the trekking region of Jomsom. An airport official says it lost contact with the control tower shortly after taking off. 2 helicopters are on a search and rescue mission, but there is no trace of the aircraft carrying 21 people missing in West Nepal. Obviously, RNZ News will update you if there's any more information on that in the immediate future. That is Checkpoint for this evening. Thank you for listening or watching, however you were with us. We're delighted to have you. We will be back tomorrow night on RNZ National at 5 o'clock.
You're listening to RNZ National. We're at 6:30. Welcome to World Watch PM. I'm John Greaves. Tonight, China deploys fighter jets on a disputed island. Barack Obama's push to shut down the detention centre at Guantanamo Bay, and part 2 of my conversation with the Israeli ambassador. That and more in World Watch PM. Tensions in the South China Sea have escalated with the news that China's deployed fighter jets on a disputed island in the area, the same island where the United States says China fired surface-to-air missiles last week. Those reports have come on the same day that America's Secretary of State, John Kerry, held talks in Washington with his Chinese counterpart